The Intellivision Amico. If you've clicked on this video, then I assume you do not need any introduction to Tommy Tallarico's failed family-friendly game console that was never meant to be, despite the company's continued insistence that it will come to be. But if you haven't kept up with the story recently, or only know about it from the H-Bomber Guy Roblox video, you might be surprised to hear that the Amico didn't completely disappear into vapor. The story kept going. Sure, the console itself will probably never exist, but the Amico games? Some of them actually came out. In 2023, Amico Home was released, an app you can download on your tablet or smart TV to turn it into a multiplayer Amico gaming console. Damn, I guess it did come out after all. Opening the app takes you to the same dashboard shown off for the real console, and then you use a second app on a phone to turn it into an Amico controller to play the games with. And now, they've started porting these originally Amico exclusive games, massive asterisk next to that, remember that for the future, to PC and Nintendo Switch, and honestly, I feel like I am entirely to blame for this. Earlier this year, I was talking to some friends about the Amico, and I discovered that the official merch page for it is still up. Look at all this cool stuff you could buy for yourself or your child that definitely wouldn't get them bullied. I honestly can't believe this even exists. Like, can you imagine the type of person who would actually buy this stuff? So obviously I had to buy a stupid hat, because it's funny, and it has layers to it, right? They sold the Intellivision name to Atari, so had to rebrand the console to just Amico. So not only do I own merch for a console that's never going to come out, it's outdated merch. It's literally the best item of clothing I own, and it's actually a pretty good hat. I wear it out a lot more than I thought I would, which I guess I'm glad about because it cost me $50. It was like $30 for the hat and $20 for importing. So shout out my patrons for encouraging my very good financial spending. Sorry about the handheld camera, by the way. I did try recording with a webcam. Looks like shit, so I didn't bother. So I hope this was okay. And so here I am, with my stupid $50 hat, almost certainly the only revenue the Amico company has made in the last couple of years, potentially their entire existence. Then, exactly a month after I bought it, I got an email from their newsletter, which, yes, is a thing that I am signed up for, saying that they were porting free Amico games to Steam and Switch. What other option do I have but to believe that I personally funded these ports? Where else would they have gotten the money from? Evel Knievel, Finnigan Fox, and Cornhole, the free Amico games you can play today on Switch. At a cool £9.50 each, that's another nearly 30 quid that the Amico has gotten from me. I am single-handedly funding the console at this point. So, let's see what the Amico has to offer in this episode of Port Patrol, the show where we look at weird or interesting ports and spin-offs of our favourite games. Well, maybe not this time. Evel Knievel dares to ask the question, what if Trials was just kinda lame? It doesn't play all that badly, but there is just a bunch of really annoying stuff that drags the game down that led to me not really liking it. That isn't to say everything about it is bad. I dig the art style and how vibrant all the levels look. The concept for the campaign is also kinda cute, being based on the actual locations, dates, and stunts Evel Knievel performed in real life. Just, you know, with a bunch of random bullshit before each jump so you have an actual game to play through. I imagine if you're a fan of him, the fan service here is really cool, though is completely lost on me. All I know about Evel Knievel is that there's a character in The Simpsons that's kind of based on him. That is my entire frame of reference for everything in this game. All I can do is judge the game itself, and yeah. There's two main things stopping me from liking this game, and the first is the controls. There are two control options to choose from, and neither of them are ideal. Typically in games like this, the analog stick is used for controlling the rotation of your bike. Yet for this game, the analog stick is used for accelerating and braking, as are all of the face buttons. Instead, to rotate the bike, you use motion controls, and they're just so stiff feeling, especially compared to what I'm used to them being nowadays, like mostly small precise movements for gyro aiming, where minuscule movements of the controller are enough to register. This feels like a blast from the past. It felt like playing a Wii game. I don't think I have felt motion controls this imprecise since that era. You really have to tilt and rotate the controller to get any movement out of the bike, but there is a second controller option if you don't want to use motion controls. That said, it still doesn't work like you think it would. The analog stick is still accelerate, so instead the triggers rotate you. That wouldn't be too bad. I mean, obviously it is on Switch, so it'd be digital, so it's not going to be as precise as it could be, but the triggers are backwards. Pressing the left bumper doesn't rotate you backwards, it tilts forward. It feels incredibly weird, and while you could get around this by using button mapping to make it control like a normal game, I shouldn't have to do that, and I'm not making a custom controller mapping just for Evel Knievel. So I stuck it out with the tilt controls, and after readjusting, getting back in my 12-year-old's mindset playing Excite Truck for the first time, it was mostly okay. I was able to get used to it and play through the game, and then the second annoying thing reared its head at me. I feel like I shouldn't have to explain this. It feels crazy to even say it, but the fun part of playing a racing game is trying to win the race, right? Whether it's a race or a time trial, the fun of the game comes from learning the track and getting good enough at it to come first, right? But that is completely non-existent here. The first time you play a level, the bike you have will only be fast enough to get you a bronze. The silver and gold trophies are completely out of reach until you go back to them with faster bikes you unlock later in the campaign. It'd be like if you played Mario Kart at 50cc and could only get third place because first and second were using 150. It's so dumb. It ruins all the fun of trying to get better at a stage to get those better trophies, and ruins the challenge of it too. It's not actually any harder to get a silver or gold than it is a bronze, because all the time you need to reduce to get them is entirely made up for by the faster bike. If it is any harder, it's just because these earlier levels are very obviously not designed for the faster bike, so you have to trial and error your way through the map to eke out the parts of the track where you have to slow down because it wasn't designed for you to go this fast through. Which, okay, sure, it might be fine if it was just to add a bit of replayability or whatever, go back to older maps with new things to do them better as a optional objective, but the game makes you do this. At various points you'll be gatekeeped out of progression because the new bike you need to buy is more expensive than what the bronze trophies reward you with. You have no choice but to go back and get some silver or golds to get the money to progress. And it happens so often. I hadn't even been playing half an hour before it started asking me to redo old levels. It's so artificially padded and removes all the fun of trying to get better at the game. There's simply no point. It feels like playing a mobile game trying to squeeze money out of you and make you buy shortcuts. And there's a very good reason for that. Remember that asterisk I mentioned earlier? Yeah, so Evel Knievel isn't an Amico original game. It came out on iOS 10 years ago. It really is the most bare-bones conversion. The UI is still very mobile phone feeling, and it still says tap to restart whenever you die. You start to have the sinking realization that you bought a decade-old phone game that was free to play for £10, and as if to rub it in, you're greeted with a very obviously AI-generated home icon as the reward for your patronage. Presumably, all the graphics in-game are human-made, seeing that it was made in 2015. I have no idea why they didn't just repurpose some of the actually good-looking in-game art instead of giving us this, where the AI can't even make his cape look right. I'm torn on it. The game, not the shitty-ass AI art, because the gameplay is mostly okay. But the constant gatekeeping is really annoying, and the fact there's no reason to try and get good at the game. Like, even Trials, maybe the high point of this genre, is super annoying at times with how difficult it can be, but it makes up for that by having really good level design, lots to unlock, map editors, and just generally being a good game. It makes the frustration worth it. This doesn't really have those other redeeming factors, so it's just kind of annoying with no real upside. It's not a bad game, it's just not a very fun one. Even the multiplayer, which should be the highlight of a game like this, disappoints, which is wild because multiplayer was meant to be the Amico's big thing. You couldn't release a game for the console if it didn't have some sort of multiplayer. A simple race or time trial mode to play against a friend could have been fun. At least then there's some incentive to actually be good at the game, but it's not even that. It's co-op, but in the same way that like Donkey Kong Country and Oddworld were, where you just take it in turns trying to beat the level when one of you dies. It's such a massive letdown. It should have been the easiest home run this game could have gotten, but it still struck out. Let's move on to Finnigan Fox, which is by far the best game in the collection, a game that you can actually call good without a hint of irony behind the statement. It definitely would have become the Amico's killer app had the console actually come out, though let's not get too ahead of ourselves with that statement. The competition was not very strong, let's be real. It does at least have the honour of being the only game here that I actually beat though, so that should probably say something at least. In fact, I beat it twice, but more on that in like 3 sentences from now. It's a basic but solid 2D platformer with a cool mechanic where you can change seasons to create new pathways and get past obstacles. And already I feel myself running out of ideas on what to say, because I once again feel that massive asterisk looming over me. Yeah, I'm not done with that. I won't bury the lead with this one. Just like Evel Knievel, Finnigan Fox is also not an Amico original game, though the story behind it is a little more interesting. Instead of being a one-to-one port of the original, Finnigan Fox is a complete overhaul of a 2018 release called Fox and Forests, given a completely new art style and a slew of gameplay, story, and level design changes to make it easier for a younger audience. And so, here we are, 2 versions of the same game that end up being quite different from each other. So, please forgive me, but after finding out about this and beating both versions of the game, I couldn't just talk about Finnigan Fox. I have to take a look at both, see how they differ, and see which ends up on top. The most obvious point of difference is the graphics. Fox and Forests has really nice looking pixel art. I was in constant awe at how good it looked at times. It's so detailed. Every level was an absolute joy to enter, to see what the game was cooking, and the bosses especially really stood out to me. They're beautiful but terrifying at the same time, just so absolutely packed full of detail. Finnigan Fox, on the other hand, kinda looks like a Flash game, but not in a positive way. It's had all of the soul completely sucked out of it. Not looking bad necessarily, but very sterile and generic, and the massive downgrade on the bosses is depressing to behold. I really don't know why it had to go through such a dramatic overhaul. Why was the pixel art seen as not kid-friendly? Couldn't they have just made some of the bosses look less scary looking? But it's just sad to see. I can only imagine how soul-destroying it must have been replacing the original assets they worked so hard on with the newer, cheaper-looking ones. Especially when it seems like they didn't really have the time to completely remake it all, as many background objects and sprites are very obviously still the original pixel art with a blur filter thrown on top. It's like it's trying to desperately break out of its own blurry prison. When it comes to how the game plays though, it's a more interesting mixed bag. Finnigan Fox makes so many changes to the original, and I think in a lot of ways I prefer them. At their core though, they play the same. You have a crossbow to fire arrows with, and you can also do melee attacks with it, and of course you have the season changing. It's a very simple game, and I think Finnigan Fox leans into that a lot better. Fox and Forests tries to do way too much and overcomplicate itself for a game with only 8 levels. Like, you can only shoot the crossbow while on the ground. If you're in the air or crouching, you only do a melee attack, and on top of that, you even have 2 different aerial melee attacks depending on if you do it after a single or a double jump. The single jump melee is almost completely useless. Most of the time I try to use it, I would take damage. I don't hate the concept of only being able to shoot while grounded. It does add an extra layer of complexity to the gameplay, but I never found that it tangibly unfolded into anything interesting for the game itself, and it doesn't really take advantage of it. Instead, it just manifested as an annoying restriction on my moveset. There are also just way too many collectibles in this game. Again, I remind you, it only has 8 levels. You need tree seeds to open new worlds, grindstones to make your melee attack stronger, magic crystals to increase your magic bar, magic bottles to cast spells, and money for not only all those upgrades, but also to learn new moves. You don't even start the game with the actual usable aerial attack, you have to pay for it. I'm not against having these upgrades in the game, but it feels like there are lots of unnecessary layers on top of it. The money kinda ends up feeling useless because it's never a problem in-game, even when it makes you pay for checkpoints to activate them. You're never short on cash for an upgrade. If anything's stopping you from getting it, it's that you're missing one of the 80 random MacGuffins the game is expecting you to find. It becomes frustrating to find them, and feels like it takes longer to get some upgrades than it should because of it. And sometimes I have to wonder if the upgrades are even worth it. The attack upgrade only applies to melee attacks, with no way to upgrade ranged moves, outside of the different types of magic arrow you can equip, which are a limited resource which uses magic. It's kinda like saying in Metroid you can upgrade your beam attack by switching to missiles, you know? You really start to feel like these upgrades aren't worth it by the end of the game, adding loads of enemies with way too much health that makes them boring to take out. And with how unresponsive the controls can be at times, leaving me stuck in place after firing arrows for longer than it should have, or not letting me change arrows when I wanted to. Honestly, for the last level, I genuinely just ran through it and didn't even try to take time exploring, something that up to that point had actually been enjoyable with lots of hidden nooks and crannies to find, even if it hides some magic seeds you need to unlock new levels behind areas you need power-ups from later worlds to access. It's Evel Knievel all over again. It just became a bit too much for me by the end, like several small straws upon my camely back, putting a bit of a dampener on what I thought was, overall, a perfectly enjoyable game. And so, after complaining about Fox and Forests being too hard, I now have to turn around and be a little bitch, and complain that Finnigan Fox was too easy. I'm insatiable, I know. Now, I get why they made it easier. Like, yeah, duh, it's for a younger audience now, and I think if you're like 5 years old, all of the changes they made are probably for the better. But being kid-friendly doesn't mean it has to be adult boring. Assuming you aren't 5 years old, which I'm gonna take a wild guess and say you aren't, Finnigan Fox is just a pretty boring game to play. It does make some improvements though. You start with all your moves now, and gone are all the collectibles apart from the tree seeds, so getting upgrades is a lot simpler. Even the tree seeds for unlocking new moves have been put into easier to find spots, giving you plenty to unlock the next world without having to backtrack for them. You only have to backtrack if you want to unlock the secret levels, which is an improvement, I like that. Enemy health has also been brought down a lot, changing how some sections of the game play out completely. The shitty single jump aerial attack is gone, and you can fire in mid-air and while crouching, which removes a lot of the pointless feeling tension the original game had with its controls. One quite frankly baffling piece of game design from the original has also been changed here. There's a flying level in World 4 where you die in one hit, and the foreground is fucking packed to the gills with giant crystals that completely obscure what you're meant to be avoiding. Thankfully, completely fixed here. All of that would have been enough to make the game feel a lot more balanced, and if it was just that, I would definitely be calling it the better game, but it just goes a bit too far to overcorrect. Loads of enemies have been removed from levels, they're less aggressive, and have had attacks removed, and the bosses are also a lot easier. The giant spider chase in Fox and Forests was an actual, exciting chase level. I only reached the top with about 4 seconds to spare, which I get might have been a bit demanding for a 5-year-old to do, but here I had to wait nearly 20 seconds for it to catch up. I honestly thought the game had bugged out for a moment and that I was meant to do something on the way up. A lot of harder jumps have also been adjusted, meaning you no longer have to use coyote time to make it past certain obstacles. I get it, but it does mean I ended up finding Finnigan Fox a lot less interesting than Fox and Forests, even if it was a lot less frustrating. I think if Fox and Forests does sound appealing to you, I'd definitely recommend it over Finnigan Fox and just suggest you play it on easy mode. I think that might be the best of both worlds. Not to mention, it's also available on more systems and for less money. Oh, and maybe needless to say, the multiplayer is incredibly tacked on. It's just 2 flying levels reusing assets from the main game and competing to see who can get the most money. It's more than Evel Knievel, I guess. That's a very loud bike going outside my window. I find the entire situation behind this game bizarre. Amico both wanted and didn't want Fox and Forests on their console at the same time, in a way that feels really disrespectful. Like, yeah, we want your game, but we don't like it like that. Change it so we like it more. I don't know why it couldn't have just been an easier Fox and Forests, or even more than that, seeing that Amico almost certainly funded the conversion of this game. God knows why anyone would choose to develop on the Amico otherwise. I don't know why they didn't just fund a new original game from them. It could have built off what they did with Fox and Forests and would have been a much better look for them, because obviously, the moment people realised it was just an old game reskinned, people made fun of it. It's so awkward watching the credits of this supposed Amico game, which includes a load of the sprite art they had to remove, almost like an in memoriam, and then you see the massive list of backers who funded the game on Kickstarter over 2 years before the Amico was even announced. Indie game development is hard, especially financially, so I do not blame the developers' bonus level for taking the job at all. But sadly, it doesn't seem to have worked out well for them. Obviously, they never got any profit from the game coming out on Amico. The Amico home app has 0 reviews on the App Store and only 5,000 downloads on the Google Play Store, so God knows how many of those downloads converted into actual purchases in-app, and how many of those purchases were specifically for Finnigan Fox. Hi everyone, editing Lex here. Oh my god, I hate the Amico. So I downloaded the Amico home app for footage for the start of this video, and couldn't help but notice that Evel Knievel and Finnigan Fox are just not in it. Even though I thought the entire point of the app was to have every Amico game they had made available on it, those two just aren't there. So presumably the profit they made from it is zero, even though Finnigan Fox does have an iPad store page where you can buy the game and it says about the Amico home app and using an Amico controller to control it. It's just not in the actual app. But Evel Knievel I just couldn't find at all. And Finnigan Fox has a 2025 date listed instead of 2024 instead of everything else. Is this the first time that Finnigan Fox and Evel Knievel have actually been playable? Is that right? I don't know. And I'm going insane thinking about it. But either way, I think we can safely assume the profit is zero, or that's what I'm going to safely assume to save my brain. This video has been an absolute rollercoaster to make. I had no idea about Evel Knievel being a phone game originally. I had no idea that Fox and Forests exists. I have been along for a ride, and every time I think I've gotten a grip on it, it throws me a curveball like this. I don't know, as we were, I guess. And the response to the new Switch and Steam ports has, unsurprisingly, been basically non-existent, registering a whopping all-time peak player count of 2 on Steam. This port of Finnigan Fox was the studio's last project before closing down, which is so sad. Fox and Forests was a fun game that you can really feel they poured their heart into making, which ended up charming me despite its frustrations, and the game they released after it, Saga of Sins, genuinely looks incredible. I love the art style it goes for so much. I'm definitely going to check it out sometime, and I think you should consider checking out either it or Fox and Forests if either of them pique your interest. It sucks that nothing good for them came from the Amico. This video might genuinely be the best piece of advertising for this game that it will ever get. So if I manage to convince anyone that these games are worth checking out, maybe some good would have come from it after all. So all that leaves is Cornhole, the only actual Amico original game we got in this collection of supposed Amico original games. The logo sits on its home icon like the mark of the beast, a warning to all those who would venture near. It was meant to be a pack-in game with the console, in a sense the Wii Sports of Amico. However, playing the game, it's impossible to shake the feeling that despite being a launch title for a console that was meant to have come out 4 years ago, that Cornhole is still unfinished. Everyone who clicked on this video knows what a massive failure the Amico was, and was expecting this video to be a deluge of absolutely terrible games. So you may have been disappointed that the 2 games so far have been middling at the very worst. But Cornhole is about to deliver you the awfulness and failure that you crave. There's something wrong with Cornhole. I don't think I've ever had a title screen instill so little confidence in me. For those who don't know, Cornhole is a real-life game where you throw a beanbag, a wooden board, to try and get it into the hole. It's a very simple concept, and that's all this game is trying to do. Yet, despite being so simple, words fail to describe what is wrong with this game's controls. No matter what you do, or how consistently you throw, the beanbag just goes all over the place. It seems completely random. Even if you keep your arm completely straight, it will still veer off to the side sometimes. Neither me or my poor girlfriend, who I subjected to this game, and for some reason still wants to be with me afterwards, could figure out how to throw on target. I have theories as to what's happening here, but I feel I have so little control over my throws, and that what I do makes so little difference that it's impossible to tell what is actually happening. Is it too sensitive, making every tiny minute motion you make with the Joy-Con wreak havoc with your throw? Or is it calibrated all wrong, making it so inaccurate that it doesn't matter what you do, the game just kinda does whatever it wants with your input? Is the controller recalibrating its sensors between throws without telling you, changing what the default position would be, making all your throws different? Maybe the one lead I do have is that the stages all have their own wind rating, but playing one with the max wind feels no different to one that has it set to the lowest. On top of that, the game doesn't have a wind indicator to show you which way the wind is blowing or how strongly, but it did in pre-release footage of the game on Amico, even on levels which in the final game say they don't have wind. Is that what's happening? There's permanently wind blowing your beanbag in random directions, but somewhere between porting the game from Amico to Switch, the wind indicator broke and it no longer shows up? I have no idea. I feel like it could be that, but all I can say is that it should not be this hard to throw a fucking virtual beanbag into a virtual hole. It's meant to be a family-friendly game. Children are meant to play this and have fun. It should be as easy to pick up and play as Wii bowling, but here I am as a 28-year-old genuinely getting tilted at Cornhole. I cannot remember the last time I had such a viscerally negative reaction to a game. I normally try to find something of interest to latch onto into games I don't like, but here, I just could not find anything. It was a genuinely miserable experience, so forgive me if you see some repeated footage here. I could not bear to play it any longer than I did. I could talk more about the gameplay, but when the simple act of throwing the beanbag is so random and up to chance, it really doesn't matter. What difference does it make if I throw it in a higher arc or slightly move the reticle around when the beanbag is never, ever going to follow that trajectory? Does it matter that it has so many levels to play through in its campaign when it's nearly impossible to beat the very first one? I felt numb playing this game, waiting 10 seconds between turns to throw a beanbag that inevitably doesn't go the direction I actually threw it. A single match can take over 15 minutes. It is teeth-pullingly slow. I really wish I had more to say. It's the purest Amico game here. It's the only Amico game here, but the only thing I can really think to bring up is that it's funny seeing how much worse the Switch version looks than the Amico version. Amico heads stay winning, I guess. Check out the quality of those crowds. The beanbags update at a noticeably lower frame rate than the rest of the game, and all the levels are inexplicably missing their skyboxes, making them look barren. Multiplayer is what you'd expect. It's everything I just talked about, but with the misery spread across multiple people. At the very least, it's the best multiplayer offered so far, in the sense that it is actually the game you bought, but playable by multiple people, instead of just taking turns or a random side mode, so, you know, it has that going for it. I actually had a moment of panic when I first played this with my girlfriend, because they absolutely curb stomped me, like embarrassingly so. I was worried that it was actually just me being bad at the game the whole time, but despite her incredible performance Game 1, Game 2 brought us crashing back to reality, with both of us floundering and struggling to score any points. The first game must have been a fluke or an act of God or something, and my girlfriend didn't want to finish the second game. It's just so painful to play, a game so boring not even multiplayer can save it. There's a mode where you can try to see who can get the most cornholes in 30 seconds, and predictably we both scored 0. Very optimistic of the game to include that as a mode, I think. I don't like being totally negative on games nowadays. I try my best to find something in them that I like to highlight, so it's not just all doom and gloom. When I was younger making these videos, it was very easy for me to abstract the games I talked about as being in a vacuum, not caring about the context it was made in, the conditions they were made under, or thinking about the people who worked on them, or even considering that there was a chance that they could be watching me trash their work. At my worst, I'd make easy, lame jokes about them being lazy or incompetent, which is something I don't like doing now that I'm older. Having actually worked in the real world, and having worked on projects where I've tried my best, but due to reasons that were out of my control, ended up bad regardless. No one sets out to make a bad thing, and something clearly went wrong here with Cornhole. It shouldn't be like this, and whether that's due to inexperience or a lack of budget, time, or no longer having the people who made the original game 4 years ago around to work on the new versions, who can say? Ultimately, I think it was just a misguided venture from the get-go. I'm not even sure that if the controls worked properly, how good the game could have even been. Games like Wii Sports give you access to things you can't easily do in real life, not without travelling or spending money. It lets you do bowling, baseball, golf, and more without ever having to leave the house. But Cornhole? Cornhole is a game literally designed to be played in your back garden. You could buy a real-life Cornhole set for 3 times the price of this game and have infinitely more fun. It seems like a pointless concept. I don't see why any child would want to play the game virtually when they could so easily play the real thing. It'd be one thing if it did anything with the concept of it being a video game. You could make the board move around, have outlandish maps to play on, non-standard cornhole boards, or ways of playing the game that you couldn't do in real life, like in Wii Bowling with the 100-pin challenge. But no, every level just takes place in a back garden or sports arena, and the only variable apart from the wind, I guess supposedly if it even works, is how far away you toss the beanbag from. I just don't get why this needed to be turned into a video game. I think having a Wii Sports-esque pack-in title made a lot of sense for the Amico, but I cannot for the life of me begin to figure out why they thought Cornhole was going to be it. Their talents would have been better spent on literally any other concept. Hello again, it's me, Editing Lex. Okay, so this is where I'm meant to be wrapping up the video, but I just couldn't stop thinking about Cornhole. Why does it seem so broken on Switch? Would it have been like this on the Amico as well? Or what about the mobile version? I just had to know. Obviously, any sane person wouldn't go out of their way to buy Cornhole twice, especially when it's £5 more expensive on iPad than on Switch for whatever reason. So, after doing some digging on YouTube, I'm joking, of course. Yes, I bought Cornhole again on iPad. I think the Amico has managed to wrangle like £100 from me now. They better give me a free console if it ever comes out, I swear to God. The Amico home app kinda sucks, by the way. I'm lucky that Cornhole doesn't require the side buttons to be played, because I couldn't find any way to actually activate them. It would have been £15 straight down the drain. I mean, it's already down the drain, I'm never playing this game again in my life, but you know what I mean. This version of the game retains the full skyboxes that the Switch version was lacking, making it more graphically impressive, if that's the correct term to describe what I'm seeing. But more importantly, the controls work. Throwing in a straight line consistently is actually possible in this version. It felt like the game was functioning as intended. It's worth noting that to play this game, you have to hold your phone upside down, but on the Switch version you obviously keep it held the right way up. So it would be incredibly funny if it turned out the reason it barely functioned is they forgot what way around the controller would be facing. So yes, the Amico home version of Cornhole controls and plays like a real game, but that isn't to say it's great. While throwing in a straight line is easy, actually throwing the beanbag at all is a lot more difficult. You have to hold down the disc to prepare your throw, and let go of it as you make the throwing motion, in a similar way to how you hold the shoulder button on Switch. But a lot of the time, my throw would just fail. I had to try multiple times every throw to throw the beanbag. It's very odd. I don't know if there's just some input delay between the phone and the iPad or what, but maybe you can see the bigger problem with what I'm describing. Your thumb on the top of your phone is the only thing keeping it in your hand, and you have to remove your thumb, letting go of the phone as you make the throwing motion. I genuinely nearly threw my phone and my iPad multiple times while playing this. It felt incredibly sketchy. It does recommend using a lanyard, to be fair, but I don't have one of those for my phone just lying about, and even if I did, neither my phone or my phone case has anywhere to attach one, so ultimately I had to two-hand it to make sure I didn't break anything and have the Amico cost me even more money than it already has. It's very awkward holding it like that. I do not recommend it, nor do I recommend just playing Cornhole at all. At the very least, I can definitely say that yes, the Switch version of Cornhole is genuinely broken. Mystery solved, £15 well spent. That's the lie I'm going to tell myself, at least. In conclusion, I really don't know what to say. The Amico saga continues, I guess. According to the newsletter announcing these ports, it's part of their phased plan to eventually release the console, so I guess we'll see. Maybe myself and the 2 people who bought these games on Steam will be enough to fund the Amico to completion. If not, I could always buy another hat. So much about the console's history is filled with failure and incompetence that I was expecting the worst from these games, and, well, I guess with the exception of Cornhole, I was pleasantly surprised. Evel Knievel was okay, but had the most dogshit progression ever, and Finnigan Fox was just genuinely pretty good, even if a better version of it had already existed for several years beforehand. And truth be told, I could have delved even deeper into this rabbit hole. I can think of at least 2 other Amico games that have come out on other platforms. Shark was another one of the original planned Pac-In games that got a mobile port in 2023, and then Amico sold the rights to another company who then ported it to home consoles. A Breakout game was also teased, exclusively for Intellivision Amico, all the way back in 2019, and when Atari bought the rights to Intellivision in 2023, they also bought the rights to over 200 games, including Breakout, renaming it Breakout Beyond and releasing it for basically everything but the Amico in March 2025. I didn't play these games because, well, for one, I didn't know about them when starting this video, and 2, after playing these games, I didn't want to play anymore, I'm sorry. The release of these 3 felt significant, being bundled together and promoted by Amico themselves, which I think makes them a bit more interesting. Will the Amico ever come out? Probably not, let's be real, and even if it did, what games could it possibly have now that they've sold basically everything they had the rights to? But at least I got a funny hat out of it, so, you know, who can say whether or not the Amico was bad or not? Anyway, thank you for watching the video. This is normally where the Patreon Patrol segment would be, but honestly, it's been like 3 months since I last loaded up Blender, and I can't remember how to use it. And I didn't want to spend any more time on the Amico than I already have. So instead, I'm just gonna read some names out. If that's cool with you. I'll do something better next time, because, like, honestly, what even is there to do with the Amico? Does anyone want to be made into a Cornhole beanbag? I don't think so. Anyway, massive thank you to my patrons, N, Video Witch, Polpo Designer, Jackie Dillinger, Brock the Archivist, June Crash Radio, Ivy, Demi Bandage, Hypergolic Mukbang, Pepper Crab, Dewey, Jake, Sean Captiville, Ryan, Simon Wachowski, Katie, Scribbler Dude, Trons, Four High Heels, and Cat. That was a very well prepared for segment, as you can tell. I definitely wasn't just awkwardly scrolling through my Patreon page and losing track of where I was. I don't know, this is about as much effort as the Amico deserves. You deserve better. I just want this video done, I'm sorry.